Welcome here to the first panel of the morning for the Enterprise Video Conference. My name is Paul Riesmandel, and I am one of the conference, I guess we're called co-chairs, along with several other very prominent folks in the enterprise education media industry. And I want to make a quick note that if you have any comments about how this first Enterprise Video Conference has gone, what you've liked, what you don't like, feel free to talk with me, or you can talk with Eric Hards. He's here in the room, as well as Patty Perkins. You've probably seen her about in many of the panels as well. So feel free to give us some comments, and we'll be sure to use them to help put together the next Enterprise Video Conference show. So I am and there's Patty walking in right there. So again, you can grab her right now before things get underway. If you have any comments about I am the Director of Curriculum Support at the School of Communication at Northwestern University. I work in educational technology and, of course, with a specialty in online video. And today's topic for the panel is captioning, which I happen to think is a very important topic. Accessibility is going from something which people are sort of have to be sort of reactive to something to which really organizations have to be proactive about. And this is across the board, whether you're in education, whether you are in an enterprise, and increasingly in entertainment. And I'm just kind of curious to see if we get a little bit of a breakdown here. How many people are here from an educational institution, K through 12, or higher education? Okay, great, thank you. And how many people are from an enterprise organization? And I'd also like to know, is anyone here from broadcast or entertainment? One. Okay, great. Are you in broadcast, or are you in more of a production? Digital media entertainment. So you don't work with anything that the FCC touches. Okay. And the reason I ask that is because there are some regulations now in force about having to caption things online if they're also captioned on broadcast. So we just want to know whether or not that's something we really need to touch on during this panel. So what I'd like to get started with right now is to have our panelists introduce themselves, and we'll jump right in.
All right. I'm Ian Weber. I'm at the Rochester Institute of Technology. I'm a senior manager of academic technology and media services. Our group encompasses basically three main areas. The first is our classroom support, so we do all the installs and technology that's supported in the classroom. We do support and training on our academic technology, so our learning management system, our wiki system, our web conferencing system. And then the last group is our media production group, which does a lot of multimedia development for all faculty on campus, both online and on campus. And that group is specifically charged with supporting captioning and accessibility for the main RIT campus.
Good morning. I'm Peter Schott. I'm Director of Digital Production from Cengage Learning. And Cengage is a leading provider of teaching, learning, and research solutions for the academic, professional, and library markets. And we have offices worldwide, and we have about 6,000 employees. My main focus is audio and video production, and because of that, I've been charged with the implementation of captioning and transcription policy across our digital online products as well as manufactured DVD products.
My name is Kevin Erler. I'm a co-founder of Automatic Sync Technologies, which is a captioning services company. I am an engineer by training, so besides providing technical expertise to Automatic Sync, I've also been providing technical expertise to several of these captioning litigation cases that you might have been reading about.
Before we get started, I think it's useful to understand why your organizations, Ian and Peter, why they got involved. What made you start captioning to begin with? Maybe you can start with that question, Ian.
Okay. RIT is in a unique place. We have the National Technical Institute for the Deaf on campus. So, a number of years ago in our online learning program, with them being on campus, it was a huge priority to have all of our online material captioned. It was, hard for us to know exactly what types of students we were getting into our online courses, before they were actually enrolled and registered in the courses. So you wouldn't know until the first day of classes what students you had enrolled. It became, we've been doing that since, material was on VHS, so we moved from VHS to CD delivery to online delivery through the years. In recent years, it became even more of a higher priority on the general campus to have not only our online courses captioned, but as well as the media that's being used inside the classroom so that faculty weren't just having interpreters sign the material that's on screen, but actually have the material that they're delivering in their on-campus courses captioned as well. So the Provost at the Institute has a Provost F Access Committee, and they basically mandated on campus that everything be captioned, and they turned to our group and allowed us to subsidize and help support everyone on campus besides just our online organization.
Was this motivated at all by any regulatory requirements or the environment there?
It was mostly motivated by the environment there. There's a lot of stuff going on between the main RIT campus and NTID. And several years ago, I think mid-90s issue, was a lot of protests from some of the students in NTID regarding access on the main RIT campus. So that's when the Provost F Access Committee formed. And that was the main motivation for really putting an emphasis on captioning for course materials.
And what about Cengage? How did captioning come about there?
Well, captioning became a business priority at Cengage based upon recommendations from our chief legal counsel as well as our senior leadership. And as a textbook publisher, many state institutions were required to offer the digital ancillaries associated with the textbooks to be captioned and to have transcriptions, and particularly video and audio and all of our digital products. So Cengage also saw there was liability issues associated with that and sales issues, but also we have a mission to offer our digital products and our printed products, for students of all ability levels. And so it became essentially a enterprise-wide initiative that was led by the senior leadership of the company.
And was there any resistance within the organization? I mean, it sounds like it came from senior leadership, and those things usually aren't resisted strongly. But did there have to be any sort of awareness building within the organization?
Well, absolutely. When you do product development, when you do business requirements, as well as when you're building your pedagogy around specific portfolios, it's really important to have accessibility and captioning in the front of your mind. Edit for it so you can apply resources to it so that you can focus and have a unified approach across an enterprise. Yes, so I guess the challenge is getting all the key stakeholders together and getting everybody on the same page, both from an editorial and from a product management and a technology editorial perspective.
What about at RIT? Was when the mandate came to begin captioning, was there a lot of resistance, be it within your organization, or did you have resistance from even, say, faculty or from other stakeholders?
Initially, for the online courses, there wasn't a lot of resistance from those faculty. We were bundling and delivering the whole online learning package, with the multimedia and the video that was required for the courses. As we've shifted and expanded that out to all of campus, it's been an interesting adventure there. A lot of faculty, there's just a lack of awareness as to exactly what is needed for accessibility and those sorts of things. So we've really made an effort to engage faculty in, teaching them exactly what they need to do for their courses and teaching them about accessibility. One of the things that we've actually done is the interpreters that interpret for courses, we've actually been giving them business cards for our unit in order to tell faculty the service is available. You don't have to pay for it. This is subsidized. And really working with faculty to try to pull down delivery time on this materials. It's really difficult. Faculty find material on YouTube or find material wherever now, and the next day expect to have it ready for their courses. So it's a little bit of just education.
So does the time needed for the captioning, does that create some of the faculty resistance?
Yes, definitely. And, in the past, so a few years ago, our service was running about a 2-week turnaround time, and we've been trying to pull that down faster and faster over the years. We're getting down so that we can actually turn materials around in approximately 5 days now or less. So it's been a struggle. It's been the biggest faculty complaint is, I want that material available tomorrow. So.
And I don't know if you interface directly with faculty, but how do you get them on board? How do you make sure that they're cooperative and not complain too much, or understand really the motivation behind captioning?
A lot of the times it's getting information from the interpreters or getting information from students, and then actually reaching out to some of those faculty. A lot of it, there's no formal network. We just try to constantly be talking about our message of it's important to do captioning in addition to having interpreters in class, and just constantly discussing and getting out in front of the faculty as much as possible.
So Kevin, in these two instances, there seem to be real organizational mandates to go forward with captioning. Is this similar to a lot of the other enterprise or schools that you've dealt with, or sometimes are you dealing with maybe somebody who is a great advocate for accessibility and captioning, but maybe doesn't yet have a full organizational mandate? What other organizations look like?
Right. Well, let me say, when we got our start in this, we were originally working on a grant from the U.S. Department of Education. So what that meant is when we started, we were very focused on educational institutions. And certainly the primary motivation from that crowd has been compliance. So we usually get engaged when there is a need to stay in compliance with the regulations around this. Certainly, that comes in different flavors. Sometimes it's a institution or organizational wide mandate. More often than not, though, it's much narrower in scope, and it's something that person then has to build out support for across the rest of the organization. We have, over time, though, gotten more and more involved with enterprise. And enterprises, corporate needs for captioning or corporate motivations for captioning are much more varied. There's certainly a compliance issue that folks need to pay attention to, but there's a number of other benefits that captioning provides that audience is very in tune with. So I'm talking about things like search engine optimization. When you put a video up on a website, the search engines can't drill into it and see what's there. So those videos get indexed by what you have in the title or what you have as metadata. If you caption it, and if you do it right, that caption track becomes indexable by the search engine. So you start to draw a lot more eyeballs to your content, and that's something that motivates a lot of corporate users to look at captioning.
So Peter, have you seen some of these benefits then, these ancillary benefits which Kevin has mentioned?
Yes, definitely. So when in educational publishing, we have subject matter experts who are looking at all the different assets that we have. And in many cases, there's thousands of videos on math or calculus or foreign languages. And it enables them to search actually through the captioning files in order to choose and select audio and video assets that have been captioned to be placed in new editions of a product, for example. Additionally, we've involved our sales and marketing force, in our captioning and accessibility initiatives. And this has actually had a big return on investment from an adoption side, from our viewpoint on a business side, where we've had what you call takeaways from our competitors because our products and our digital ancillaries are all captioned.
And what about on RIT? You're not going to see the same sort of immediate financial ROI, but are you experiencing some of these other benefits?
Absolutely. One of the things we did initially is allow search capabilities into the transcripts for students to use that for study review. So for instance, when a faculty member discusses a certain term, a student can go into that video, search that term, and it shows up on all the different places where that term is used. So it's a great study tool for the students.
Do you get feedback from students, both those who have a hearing disability and those who do not, that are positive, or do you get a sense that there may be students who are choosing an RIT program, especially an online program, because of the captioning?
I don't know any specifics on students choosing the programs, but we definitely get feedback from students, particularly on the search capabilities that I mentioned, and also from students indicating that they use the captions for a lot of different reasons. Some people use them in their offices when they're at lunch to actually listen to watch the videos and watch the captions instead of having the audio on. We've also had English as a second language students and some students with other specific learning needs that have taken advantage of the caption files that exist.
So it sounds like as a higher education institution, I mean, what it's allowing you to do is to adapt to a lot of different learning styles, different learning modalities, which is, I think, probably very important in the distance learning arena, in particular because for a lot of schools, distance learning is one way of increasing the number of students that your capacity, essentially, beyond what you may be able to do on the ground. And for many universities now, distance learning is a profit center, not a cost center. So it sounds like that captioning is really helping you to expand your audience in that way. And Kevin, I was hoping maybe you could give us a little sense of what the process is for one of your client institutions in terms of getting their videos captioned so that they can have it turned around and say, as Ian mentioned, in like a week or so.
Yeah, but let me actually just add one comment to the topic you were just touching on. I expect that students with disabilities are actually attracted to online learning programs in particular because of accessibility and transportation issues. So you might actually find that the audience in your distance learning gets even a greater benefit from making that content accessible than a general overall audience. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind.
Absolutely.
Actually, I can add to that. We don't have any specific marketing numbers on the value add there, but we had a faculty member a number of years ago who was actually a blind faculty member, and one of the comments that he sent back was that it was great because in his online course he was for the first time able, as a blind faculty member, able to interact with deaf students in a very easy manner. So.
Right. It would never occur to me that you'd be able to help cross barriers that would otherwise be difficult to cross. So what's this process look like, Kevin? What can a client expect?
Right. So, like I said, we originally started into this based on a grant we got from the U.S. Department of Education. And the point of the grant was to go look at how captioning was being done at that time and try and remove some of the barriers to it. And those barriers were cost, but they were also workflow barriers. Workflow is very important in this, especially if you've got a lot of content to deal with. So we really spent a lot of time figuring out how do you make this easy. Back in 2003, when we started this, most traditional captioning vendors were actually having you send physical media off for captioning, which tremendously extended the timeline involved and was rather inconvenient. So what we've focused is using a lot of web automation tools to make this happen. So we've tried to create systems where you just do it all online. It's accessible to you 24/7. You just log in, submit a piece of media, and we'll process it, transcribe it, caption it, and send you back the caption files. It's the process of getting captioning is really quite easy. It's what to do with the captioning after that you have to pay a little bit of attention to. So figuring out what you're going to do with those caption files, how you get your players to support them, how you get this stuff on your website. That's stuff that you're going to have to roll up your sleeves a little bit and figure out. But I don't mean to scare you on this. Once you figure it out once, you're good to go.
So Peter, how are you integrating the caption text into your video products at Cengage?
Right. That was initially it was quite a challenge because Cengage is made up of multiple publishers that were acquired, and they brought with them their own systems and servers and databases, et cetera, and their own video players, for example. And the way they handled captioning was there was multiple different methods. So what the biggest challenge we had was to unify the approach and to work with our engineers to, at the systemic level, create players and the way it handles caption variables in order to come into our online players so that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel for every different list within the company. So we unified on a specific player the way that we implement them in our digital products in HTML or HTML5, and that was basically the way we integrated it into our products. Regarding what Kevin was talking about before, that process it works very well for us. We have individual users who set up accounts. 95% we work with automatic sync technologies. And we set up different users. We submit the media, it comes back in like 72 business hours, and then we hand off those captioning assets and transcriptions to the web development and web services teams.
And how are you doing it at RIT?
We're doing a number of different things. We have two basic categories that we're working in now. First is our DVD content. We still require that a lot of like feature-length films or things that our faculty are using in classes remain on DVD in our checkout, and we can check them out through the library. A lot of that stuff is due to copyright restrictions and everything that we still encourage that. So we have one method for captioning those DVDs, and that's a very much more traditional workflow that we go through with that, and we use Premiere or Mac Caption to pull in content and author those DVDs. For our online content, that's been a very unique adventure over a number of years. We started in 2000. Before 2005, we had a bunch of content on CDs, and we had some real video things that were created, and we distributed things that way. And then we started moving online, and we really started moving online into the streaming format. We actually created our own video player at that time. It was a flash video player, flat file back end to it, where we were storing all of our videos on a flash server, and a lot of XML caption files on another server, and then our player would pull that content together in one spot. Since that time, we did that when we primarily had mostly all online courses, and when we expanded out to all of campus, it became more important for us to begin automating more of that process. So what we started, we just actually implemented this last summer, was using the Ensemble video platform to distribute all of our video content, and we worked with them and AST to integrate our back-end process, so more of that is automated. So faculty can actually submit it in an online form, submit their videos to us. We'll post it into Ensemble. Once that's posted up there, it automatically gets sent to AST. We actually create the library for the faculty member, give them the embed code to put into the LMS, and then on the back end, once that captioning is finished, caption files are finished, it automatically drives it back to the Ensemble server, and the captions are there for the faculty member. So the video content is up within a day, and usually once those caption files are done 2 or 3 days later, it's right there on the server ready to go.
So Kevin, are you prepared, is your company prepared to help a client who maybe is a little bit more in the wild with regard to how they're going to get the captions on their videos online, and, to help them come up with solutions, perhaps with an online video platform or some similar product?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time on that, and some of that's a little bit difficult because there's nuances to everybody's particular instantiation of what they have. But what we have tried to do over the years is build up a video library of kind of tutorials, how-tos, and we make that accessible to folks. And we're always keeping an eye open for new situations to create more tutorials on. But we've found that is one of the best tools to sort of disseminate information about how this is done. The other approach that we've really focused on that I think is going to be important going forward is integration. So the stuff that Ian was just talking about. There's video management platforms, there's lecture capture systems, there are a variety of different hosting type platforms. If we can integrate captioning services right into those platforms so that it's just click this button and your content gets captioned, that obviously makes life a lot easier for the end user. And we've really tried to do a lot of that sort of stuff with folks like Ensemble, as Ian mentioned, but also with folks like Brightcove and Kaltura.
Are you finding generally that most video management systems are supporting captioning pretty well?
So sometimes that takes a little bit of convincing. It's probably not the first thing on their list. But, there's more and more receptivity out there to captioning. There's been a couple very high-profile litigation cases about captioning, which has brought a lot of attention to this. So there's certainly an increased sensitivity about the need to protect your users from liability.
And is this litigation, I know some of these cases have been with institutions of higher education, been universities. Have there also been some that have touched the enterprise?
Yeah, and in fact, the enterprise ones are very, very interesting. So there's the high-profile case that just settled within the last few weeks was Netflix. Netflix got sued for not providing captioning. There's some recent legislation called the CVAA, which is kind of an extension of the FCC regulations about broadcast captioning into the internet. So if you're putting television content out on the internet, then you're supposed to be captioning that content. What was fascinating about Netflix, the Netflix case, was that it wasn't prosecuted on the CVAA requirements. And this is actually goes in hand with a decision that came down for Target a couple of years ago. It was prosecuted under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And in a nutshell, I'm grossly oversimplifying this, but in a nutshell, the findings in both of those cases were that these were businesses, a place of public accommodation, it's called, so they needed to present their website with the same degree of accessibility that you might have to present your physical facilities. So just like you have to put wheelchair ramps on your physical facilities, you have to make your website equally accessible. I think those are extraordinary findings and precedents to be set, and so it's something that has a much broader impact than just those folks streaming out television content on the internet. It impacts all corporations.
And, I feel like I have to ask this question because it's a question that I get a lot of the time working in video production within a university. And that is, well, I mean, can't you just run this through Dragon, naturally speaking? You're telling me that, can't we, why is it going to take a few days? Can't you just, have a computer do all the work and come up with captions? Can't I?
That's the silver bullet, isn't it? Wouldn't it be great? So my background is actually, I didn't talk about this to begin with, but my background is actually in automated speech recognition. I spent a lot of years researching that, and I still dabble in it quite a bit. Unfortunately, I've become kind of the biggest naysayer of speech recognition. Speech recognition works great for very specific applications where you know something about the speaker, you know something about the environment they're speaking in, and you know something about the topic. In those cases, you can make a speech recognition system perform very well. Unfortunately, with general captioning, none of those three constraints apply. And you'll get error recognition rates that are above 20%, 20% word error rates. It turns out that people are quite sensitive to errors. Once the word error rate in a document exceeds about 3%, you're going to be very unhappy with that document. Once it exceeds about 5%, you're not going to be willing to read it. And here's the remarkable thing. Once it exceeds about 10%, you're not even going to be able to tell what the topic was. Isn't that amazing? 1 in 10 words is wrong, and you can't figure out what the speaker was even talking about. So no, speech recognition isn't an adequate solution for captioning.
Yeah, I can concur with that. We're very sensitive to accuracy, and our editorial groups insist on a very high level of accuracy. So in fact, when we submit our audio and video for captioning, we have a secondary step in the process where our subject matter experts check for accuracy and actually make corrections to transcripts, and then we resubmit for the synchronized captioning. Because when you're dealing with medical or nursing or hard side disciplines like calculus or chemistry or something like that, our students and our instructors that use our products insist upon a very high level of accuracy, and so they couldn't go with the regular speech recognition.
And you have a little longer sort of product cycle, right, in terms of your time in which things need to be, hit the streets, essentially, compared to, say, university.
Right. Well, we go by copyright years, so we usually have an edition that's out for maybe 2 years. Okay. And they usually don't sunset in many cases. So we'll have multiple editions of the same product. And so once it's out there and being adopted by an institution, we want it to be very high level of accuracy. So we take a lot of, we put a lot of effort into accuracy checking and proofing. I think there was a question over here. Yeah.
Yeah. What are the requirements for adherence of the captioning to the actual speech? For example, can you closed caption a script from which the speaker is deviated? Or can you put an outline of the topics and the speaker is sentencized the outline topics? They put a few sentences on it. I mean, how accurate, how closely does the captioning for compliance purposes have to adhere to what was actually said?
So I'm going to repeat the question for the video, and that is, from a regulatory standpoint, a compliance standpoint, do the captions have to hew exactly to what is spoken, or could they come from a script or an outline that is close?
I'm going to preface my answer by reminding you that I'm an engineer, not a lawyer. It's my understanding that that's a very gray area. Under the ADA legislation, you have to give an equivalent and timely experience to the user, and so it doesn't specify things like accuracy rate. The argument would become one of, is what you're providing an equivalent experience? So I would suggest that probably means you can't deviate too far.
Well, often speakers make mistakes, or they use the wrong word and they meant the right word.
Mm-hmm.
If they do a Nixon or something like that. So it's nice to put in the caption, but the actual thing that you wished he'd said or could have said.
So I can tell you what the best practice is, which is what captioning companies attempt to do, which is to verbatim transcribe what was said. We're trying to provide an equivalent experience where it's dangerous to sort of get into the game of trying to correct what the speaker said, because, of course, you can introduce new errors that way. So we try to provide an accurate reflection of what was actually spoken.
And we follow that as a best practice too, and we get a lot of feedback from students, and they want to have exactly what the person said. So we often, recommend faculty use a script to actually present from, because it actually does save us a little bit of money and makes the presentation even a little bit better from just the presentation attributes. But we will go back in often and review those transcripts and work on, making them accurately reflect what the faculty member said. Not many.
So the question,
we encourage it, but
is that primarily in the distance learning environment as opposed to the on-the-ground environment?
Yeah, primarily in the distance learning environment. And we encourage it without, when we meet with faculty for the first time, we encourage all of them to write a script. We just, we think it does, provides a better presentation in the end, but probably 2% actually do it.
All right, we can take some other questions. Yes, please.
Could you comment on whether you're speaking entirely about English text that is being captioned, or do any of you have experience with foreign language?
So the question is, are we talking about only English texts, or we have foreign language texts as well?
I can answer that. We do, the majority of our captioning is English, but we also do multiple world languages. At Cengage, we do French, Italian, German, Spanish, Japanese, Chinese. So we do a lot of different languages. We do special customized captioning based on transcripts for other languages as well. So yes, in those cases, in most of those cases, we're provided with a transcript up front, so that when we do video production or we're doing audio recording for student activity manuals, instructor resources, these type of things, we have a verbatim script that's usually very closely adhered to. So it helps in the captioning process for world languages.
Is the voice recognition software for foreign languages up to par to what we have for English?
So the question is for other languages other than English, is voice recognition system up to par to what we're used to experiencing with, say, Dragon?
So English has always been the sort of forefront language of research in speech recognition. There are some languages that have equivalent or similar performance to English, but that's certainly not true for all languages. Building a speech recognition system today generally means collecting a huge amount of data, recordings of people speaking that language. And so the research community generally has access to a lot of English data for that, but less so for some of the more esoteric languages.
I'm actually curious if you're captioning the foreign language classes at RIT.
We are not. Mostly everything that we do is in English format. We have had a few cases where we've had some DVDs that were in foreign languages where it's been both requested to translate and also provide the native language that's on that material. It's always something that throws us for a little bit of a loop, and we stumble through that process quite often. A lot of times it also involves using lots of different video capture card technologies to try to pull the content off of those DVDs if there's something that already exists.
Well, and it gets, at least with regard to teaching a foreign language, it would probably get complex with the pedagogy, since so much of it is training students to hear the language well. Providing them an opportunity to read it might interfere with the actual learning goals. Any other questions?
Do you work with captioning scenarios around live events as opposed to recorded video?
So the question is, are you working in captioning scenarios with live events?
Yes. So we actually have a unit that does, for live events on campus, we have, most of those aren't class related. They're usually, graduation events and those types of things. They have units that they've hired to provide that captioning for those events. The one thing that we deal with quite a bit is live sessions on Adobe Connect. So we actually work with a number of different vendors to provide that service for students. So I think it's Caption Colorado and Caption First are the two that we've been using for there. We also have a unit on campus that has their own. We're working on developing CPrint, so they do basically live captioning for students on campus, and they're working on integrating those tools into Adobe Connect to caption for that as well.
Peter, do you do any live, or is everything you're already,
No, the majority of the video and audio products that we do are embedded in digital products, or they're put into manufactured products. That said, we're getting more involved in doing planning for live lecture capture at our production facility in Boston, and the potential of streaming, and we're yet to cross that and figure out the best way to caption that material.
So does CDAA legislation apply to live or for recorded video only?
So the question is, does the CDAA legislation apply to live or just recorded on demand?
Did I give you my engineer disclaimer? My understanding of the legislation is that it applies to content that's previously been broadcast on television, which would inherently mean it's not live. But I'm not 100% sure about that.
So consult your lawyer is what that was. Any question here?
Yeah, I work in online learning for higher ed, and so I've seen some of the interactive transcripts. I've seen it in publisher material and then on YouTube as well. I'm curious about your thoughts on this. Is it something that is going to coexist with closed captions, or is it going to be a transition to the interactive transcript to make it easier for students?
So the question is, with regard to interactive transcripts. I'm sorry, I don't know what an interactive transcript is. Could you tell us real quickly what that is?
It's usually by the video or underneath the video, and it kind of highlights the word as you go, and you can click, and it'll jump to that portion of the video if you want to go down.
So the interactive transcript is an actual written transcript instead of appearing on screen. It appears alongside, and you can track what the speech in text as it appears in the video. So you want to know how does that interact with captioning?
Go ahead.
Do you want to go?
Sure, I can address that to some extent. Captioning, the legacy of captioning comes from broadcast television. That's where it first came out. And that's a very kind of stilted presentation. It's very rigid. You can only do this with captioning. as this stuff moves to online presentations, we have a tremendous amount more flexibility about how that data is presented. Ultimately, it's just the same old captioning data. It's just a different way of rendering that material. The interactive transcript material or interactive transcript format that you see on YouTube is a novel and clever way of presenting captioning data. And, I think they put it out there to see how people are going to use it. I doubt it will replace traditional closed captioning because there is this whole legislative, this body of legislation out there which is dictating how you have to present this content. But I think that you will continue to see some innovation around how that data is presented and trying to make it more useful and interactive with viewers. And that's a perfectly reasonable way of presenting that kind of information, I think.
Yeah, the way we use it at Cengage, we divide up videos into specific time codes so that from 1 minute to 1 minute 30 seconds, you watch that little segment of a video, and then there's questions and assessment associated with the time codes in there. There's other searchable interactive captions that I'm in discussions with the engineering teams about, so that if somebody wants to do a search on a large research archive on, say, quadratic equations or something like that, they could search the whole thing, and then it would bring that student directly to the time-coded segment of the video that discusses that topic, and you'd be able to click on the highlighted caption location, and it would start the video right from that time-coded location.
We're doing something very similar to that, and I think it's going to be a combination of different technologies that go along with the traditional view of captions on the screen. I mean, the students expect to see a certain thing on screen and right there with the video that they're watching, and if there's deviation from that, they complain to us quite a bit about that. But we don't have it in our ensemble player yet that we're using for that server, but we have it on our custom player that we built. Our search feature does about the same thing, where it highlights, if they put in a term, it highlights every spot. It gives a little green dot every spot on the timeline of where that phrase was used, and they can scroll over that and get a little information on the rest of the text around it and the context that was within, and then they can click on that and it'll jump them to that place in the video.
What kind of feedback do you get on that, as opposed to people differentiate of like, I like this so much better, or this is easier to use, or I prefer the traditional?
So we've been putting the search features into our materials since we had players that were on real video delivered on CD, and on all of our survey data that we get back, students are very positive about that feature and say that they use that as a study aid.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Do we have any? All right.
Paul,
Well,
may I make one closing comment?
You may.
We've sort of talked a little bit about the reason why people caption is often a compliance issue, and I really wanted to close this out on a more positive note and point out that there's a lot of other reasons to caption, and we touched on a little bit of it here with that SEO comment, but there's far more than that. At the simplest level, what you're doing is making your content accessible to a larger audience, and people often dismiss that as a fairly small additional incremental audience that you're making it accessible to, but it's not. It's a very large audience. Right now, the statistics suggest that roughly 10% of the U.S. population has hearing impairments of some sort, and that number is likely to grow as our demographic ages. But captioning is used by far more than the deaf and hard of hearing. It's also used by folks with certain learning disabilities. It's also used by folks with English as a second language. By presenting captioning, you make your content accessible to a much larger audience, and you make your content more comprehensible to that audience. That is, they're likely to comprehend and retain your content much better if you can present captioning. So there's a lot of positive reasons for captioning. Compliance is just one of them.
Great. Well, it's a great note to close on. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the show.